Commander Zektar of the Kethvar Empire stood proudly before the assembled Galactic Council, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of triumph. The crystalline chamber aboard the neutral space station Concordia fell silent as representatives from dozens of species turned their attention to the reptilian warrior. "Honored delegates," Zektar announced, his voice carrying the arrogance that had made his people both feared and despised across the galaxy. "The Kethvar Empire has achieved another glorious victory. We have claimed the world designated as Solthri, previously called Terra by its extinct inhabitants." A ripple of whispers spread through the assembly. The name Terra carried weight among the older civilizations, though few remembered exactly why. Ambassador Thelandra of the Ethereal Collective, her translucent blue form shimmering slightly, leaned forward with interest. "Terra, you say? How fascinating. Tell us about this conquest, Commander." Zektar's chest swelled with pride. The planet was defenseless, abandoned by its previous occupants 500,000 years ago. These humans, as they called themselves, built impressive cities and monuments, but they were clearly a primitive species. Archaeological evidence suggests they fled their world in the face of some catastrophe, likely their own environmental destruction. The Vorthek representative, a massive insectoid creature, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Humans, that name echoes in our oldest databanks." "Ancient history," Zektar dismissed with a wave of his hand. "What matters is that Terra now belongs to the Kethvar Empire. Its location provides strategic value, and our preliminary surveys indicate rich mineral deposits. We have already begun establishing our first colonial outposts." Elder Morgeth of the Zenthri, one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, slowly rose from his floating meditation pod. His ancient voice carried across the chamber like wind through cosmic dust. "Commander Zektar, you claimed this world was defenseless." "Completely," Zektar confirmed. "No orbital defenses, no active technology, no resistance whatsoever. The humans clearly abandoned it in haste, leaving behind only ruins and primitive artifacts." A strange sound began to emerge from various parts of the assembly. It started as a low rumble from the Vorthek delegation, then grew as other species joined in. The Ethereal Collective's melodic tones mixed with the mechanical harmonics of the Synth-Arch Federation. Even the normally stoic Granite Lords began their deep, geological chuckling. The entire Galactic Council was laughing. Zektar's forearms dropped to his sides, his expression shifting from pride to confusion, then to anger. What is the meaning of this disrespect? Elder Morgeth raised a withered hand, and the laughter gradually subsided. "Forgive us, Commander. It has been so long since anyone mentioned the humans that we had almost forgotten. Your announcement simply reminded us of old times." "What are you talking about?" Zektar demanded. The Vorthek representative leaned forward, his compound eyes gleaming. "Tell me, Commander, did your archaeological teams find any evidence of human military installations? Weapons factories? Warships?" "Of course not," Zektar replied. "They were clearly a peaceful species. We found libraries, art galleries, hospitals, schools. No significant military presence at all." The laughter resumed, louder this time. Ambassador Thelandra's form flickered with amusement. "Oh, dear Commander, you have no idea what you stumbled into, do you?" "Enlighten me," Zektar growled, his patience wearing thin. Elder Morgetha's ancient eyes seemed to look through time itself. 500,000 years ago, the humans didn't flee Terra because they were weak, Commander. They left because they had become too dangerous to remain. "Impossible," Zektar scoffed. "The archaeological evidence clearly shows exactly what they wanted future visitors to find." The Synth-Arch representative interrupted, its mechanical voice carrying undertones of what might have been respect. "The humans were master strategists. They understood that true strength lies not in what you display, but in what you conceal." The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence carried weight. Zektar looked around at the assembled delegates, noting the mixture of amusement, concern, and something that might have been pity on their faces. "You're telling me these extinct primitives were somehow dangerous?" he asked, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Not were. Commander," Elder Morgeth said quietly. "The humans didn't go extinct. They simply, evolved beyond the need for planetary civilization. They scattered to the void, becoming something far more adaptable, far more dangerous than any empire. Zektar felt a chill run down his spine, though he tried to hide it. Even if that were true, it was 500,000 years ago. Their ancient history. The Vorthak clicked his mandibles in what his species considered a grin. Time means little to beings who have transcended physical limitations, Commander. And there's one thing about humans that every species in this galaxy learned long ago. Which is? Elder Morgetha's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every being in the chamber heard him clearly. Never, ever take their home. The silence that followed was absolute. Somewhere in the depths of space, monitoring stations began picking up strange energy signatures. Ancient sensors, dormant for millennia, started to awaken across the galaxy. And on the planet Terra, in the ruins of what had once been called New York City, a Kefar colonial outpost received its first transmission from the void. It was a simple message, broadcast on frequencies that predated known galactic civilization. "We know you're there." The Kefar colonial ship Dominant Fang hung in orbit above Terra like a predator claiming its prize. Captain Veldar watched the planet's blue-white surface through the observation deck, satisfaction warming his scaled chest. 3 months had passed since Commander Zektar's announcement to the Galactic Council, and the colony was thriving. Mining operations had begun, preliminary cities were under construction, and thousands of Kefar civilians were making Terra their new home. The warnings from the Council had been dismissed as the superstitious ramblings of ancient species clinging to outdated phase. The humans were gone. The archaeological evidence was clear. "Captain," came the voice of Communications Officer Nalseth over the intercom, "we're receiving another one of those transmissions." Veldar's tail twitched with annoyance. For weeks, they had been picking up strange signals from deep space. Always the same message, always on those archaic frequencies. "We know you're there." His technical staff had analyzed the transmissions extensively, concluding they were likely echoed from ancient human communication satellites, their automated system still functioning after 500,000 years. "Ignore it," Veldar ordered. "Focus on the mining reports." But down in the communications bay, Nalseth was staring at his instruments with growing unease. The signal wasn't coming from Terra's orbital space anymore. It was getting closer. On the planet's surface, the city of New Kefar sprawled across the ruins of what had once been Manhattan. Kefar engineers had marveled at the human architectural remains, particularly the massive steel framework that had somehow resisted 500,000 years of weathering. They built their new structures within and around these ancient skeletons, creating a bizarre fusion of reptilian efficiency and human ambition. Colony Administrator Graktar stood atop the Central Command Tower, surveying his domain. The population had reached 50,000, with more transports arriving daily. Resource extraction was ahead of schedule. Everything was perfect. That's when the sky changed. It started as a shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. But this was space, where no such phenomenon should exist. The shimmer spread, growing larger and more defined, until it began to take shape. Ships, hundreds of them, thousands. They materialized out of nothing, their hulls seeming to bend light itself. They were unlike any vessels in the known galaxy, organic curves mixed with geometric precision, surfaces that shifted and flowed like liquid metal, and an aura of age that spoke of technologies developed across eons. The human fleet had returned. Aboard the Dominant Fang, alarms shrieked as sensors tried to make sense of what they were detecting. Captain Veldar rushed to the bridge, his forearms frantically accessing multiple control stations simultaneously. "Report," he barked. "Ships, Captain," his tactical officer stammered. "Thousands of them. They just appeared." "Impossible. Nothing can bypass our sensors." "They are not following standard physics, sir. Our instruments are reading massive energy signatures, but also detecting temporal distortions, dimensional rifts, and quantum signatures we don't recognize." On the main view screen, the human fleet arranged itself in a perfect sphere around Terra. Each vessel was unique, as if individually crafted rather than mass-produced. Some appeared to be grown rather than built, their surfaces pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Others seemed to exist partially in normal space, their edges fading into dimensions the Kefar sensors couldn't perceive. So, Communications Officer Nalseth called out, his voice barely controlled. We're receiving a transmission. It's coming from all of them simultaneously. On screen, the bridge fell silent as a figure materialized in the holographic display. It appeared human, but changed, taller than the archaeological record suggested, with features that seemed to shift slightly as if not quite fixed in space-time. Its eyes held the depth of someone who had seen the birth and death of stars. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that resonated in frequencies beyond normal hearing, creating an almost hypnotic effect. I am Echo 7 of the Terran Collective. You have established a presence on our home world without permission. You will evacuate immediately. Captain Veldar found his voice, though it came out as more of a snarl. This world was abandoned. You have no claim here. The figure tilted its head, and something that might have been amusement flickered across its features. Abandoned? This world is as much a part of us as our own bodies. We left to protect it, and you... But protection requires distance, and distance requires vigilance. You're bluffing, Veldar declared, though his confidence was evaporating. 500,000 years, and you return now? Convenient timing. Time flows differently for us now. We have been watching, waiting, growing. Every species that has ever threatened Terra has learned the same lesson. The figure paused, and its eyes seemed to look directly at each member of the bridge crew individually. We do not make threats. We make promises. And what promise is that? Veldar asked, though he dreaded the answer. Leave now, and you will be allowed to depart safely. Remain, and discover why the galaxy learned to fear us. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Through the viewports, they could see the human ships holding position, patient as predators. So, the tactical officer whispered, our weapon systems just went offline. All of them. Simultaneously. Veldar's blood ran cold. How is that possible? I don't know, sir. It's like they just stopped working. On Terra's surface, Colony Administrator Graktar watched in horror as every piece of Kethvar technology began to shut down. Vehicles stopped in the streets. Communication arrays fell silent. Even personal devices ceased functioning. But the light stayed on. The power still flowed. The human infrastructure, 500,000 years old, continued to work perfectly. In the growing darkness of technological failure, a new message appeared on every screen that still functioned, written in perfect Kethvar script. Last warning. The emergency meeting aboard the Dominant Fang took place by the light of chemical torches. Every electronic system on the ship had failed simultaneously, leaving the massive vessel crippled in orbit. Captain Veldar sat across from Colony Administrator Graktar, who had been shuttled up from the surface using one of the few manual escape pods that still functioned. How many ships did we lose? Veldar asked, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders to crew members using primitive communication methods. All of them that tried to leave. Graktar replied, his scales pale with fear. The moment they crossed Terra's atmospheric boundary, they simply stopped, dead in space. The humans didn't fire a single shot. The ships just died. Through the observation port, the human fleet remained in perfect formation. They had moved closer now, near enough that details of their impossible architecture became visible. The vessels seemed to breathe, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that suggested consciousness rather than mere machinery. So, Chief Engineer Moltar interrupted, crawling through the access hatch that led to the ship's car systems. I figured out what they are doing to us. Explain. It's not an attack in any conventional sense. They are not jamming our systems or destroying them. They are talking to them, convincing them to stop working. Every piece of technology on this ship is receiving some kind of signal that bypasses our security protocols entirely. It's like our own equipment has decided to obey them instead of us. Veldar's forearms clench into fists. That's impossible. Technology doesn't make decisions. Ours doesn't, Moltar agreed, but theirs apparently does. Captain, I've been analyzing the energy patterns coming from their fleet. These aren't ships in any sense we understand. They're entities, living beings that happen to be ship-sized. A new voice spoke from the darkness behind them. Not quite, but closer than most species manage. The Kefar officers spun around to find a human standing in their midst. Not a hologram this time, but physically present. It was a woman, appearing to be in her 30s by human standards, wearing what looked like a simple gray uniform that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Her presence filled the room with an energy that made the Kefar's scales prickle with unease. "How did you get aboard?" Veldar demanded, reaching for a weapon that he realized would no longer function. "I've been here since you arrived," she replied calmly. "Watching, learning about you. We always study new species before making contact. The Kefar, interesting. Aggressive, but not without honor. Proud, but capable of reason when circumstances require it. You've been spying on us. Existing alongside you. We learned long ago that true invisibility isn't about bending light. It's about existing in the spaces between perception." She moved to the observation port and gazed out at Terra. "Beautiful, isn't it? 500,000 years of recovery, and she's more vibrant than ever." Graktar found his voice. "If you're so powerful, why didn't you just destroy us when we arrived?" The woman turned back to them, and her expression held genuine sadness. "Because destruction is what the old humanity would have done. We've moved beyond that. Every species deserves a chance to choose wisdom over conquest. And if we refuse to leave, then you'll discover why the galaxy tells stories about us in whispers." Captain Veldar stepped forward, drawing himself up to his full height. "We are the Kefar Empire. We don't retreat from anyone." "Empire," the woman repeated, tasting the word. "Such a limited concept. You think in terms of territory, resources, domination. We think in terms of existence itself." She gestured toward the viewport, and suddenly the human ships began to change. Their forms shifted and flowed, revealing that what had appeared to be holes were actually the outer layers of something far more complex. Beneath the ship shapes, structures of pure energy became visible, geometries that hurt to look at directly, forms that existed in more dimensions than the Kefar mind could process. "This is what we became," the woman said quietly. "Not rulers of space, but partners with it. Not conquerors of matter, but collaborators with reality itself. We don't build ships, Captain. We are ships. We don't use technology. We are technology." The display lasted only moments before the human vessels returned to their more familiar appearances, but the effect on the Kefar was profound. Moltar was openly weeping, overwhelmed by concepts his mind couldn't fully grasp. Graktar sat in stunned silence, his understanding of the universe forever altered. "Why show us this?" Veldar asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because you need to understand what you're truly facing. This isn't about military strength or technological superiority. This is about evolution. We became what we are because we learned the most important lesson in existence. True power comes not from controlling others, but from transcending the need to control." "Then why stop us from taking this world?" "Because Terra isn't just our birthplace, Captain. It's our anchor. No matter how far we evolve, how much we change, this world keeps us connected to what we were. It reminds us why we chose to become what we are." Her expression hardened slightly. "And we will not allow that connection to be severed." The woman began to fade, becoming translucent. "You have 1 hour to begin evacuation procedures. After that, we stop asking nicely." "Wait," Veldar called out. "What happens to my people? Where do we go?" She paused in her dissolution. "The galaxy is vast, Captain, full of worlds that need no guardians, no protectors watching from the void. Choose any of them. Thrive there, but not here. Never here." As she disappeared completely, the ship's system suddenly roared back to life. Lights blazed, engines hummed, communications crackled with activity. But on every screen, a countdown timer appeared. 59 minutes, 42 seconds. And falling. The evacuation of Terra began with chaos and ended with something approaching terror. As the Kefar colonists streamed toward evacuation centers, their equipment functioning just well enough to facilitate departure, they became aware of something that chilled them more than the human ultimatum. They were being helped. Invisible hands guided lost civilians toward transport points. Systems that should have failed under the strain of mass evacuation somehow operated at peak efficiency. When a Kethvar child wandered away from his family group, he was found minutes later, playing with what he described as the nice shadow lady who showed me pretty lights. The humans weren't just allowing them to leave. They were ensuring no one was left behind. Captain Veldar coordinated the evacuation from the bridge of the dominant Fang, watching transport after transport depart Terra's atmosphere without incident. His sensors showed the human fleet maintaining perfect position, a sphere of patient guardians waiting for the intruders to recognize wisdom. So, Communications Officer Nalseth reported, "We're receiving messages from the Galactic Council. They want to know our status." "Tell them we're conducting a tactical withdrawal," Veldar replied, his pride still stinging from the admission of defeat. "So, with respect, they already know what happened. The humans, they broadcast the entire encounter to every major world in the galaxy." Veldar's tail lashed with anger. "They what?" "Not as a threat, sir. More like a reminder. The message was simple. Terra remains protected. Choose your actions accordingly." Through the viewport, Veldar could see the last of the evacuation transports clearing the atmosphere. 50,000 Kethvar colonists, 3 months of construction work, millions of credits in equipment and resources, all abandoned because of creatures that shouldn't exist. "Captain," Chief Engineer Moltar called from his station, "I'm reading massive energy buildups from the human fleet. They are preparing for something." "Weapons?" "No, sir. Something else. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases." The human ships began to move for the first time since their arrival, but instead of advancing threateningly, they descended toward Terra itself. As they entered the atmosphere, their forms began to change once more, shifting from ship shape into configurations that defied description. Some vessels spread like seeds upon the wind, breaking apart into thousands of smaller forms that scattered across the continents. Others flowed like liquid light, seeping into the very bedrock of the planet. A few seemed to simply dissolve, their matter and energy dispersing into Terra's biosphere. "They are not landing," Moltar whispered in amazement. "They are becoming part of the planet." The woman from before materialized on the bridge once more, but this time she appeared less solid, as if she were being drawn elsewhere. "The reunion begins," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of joy that transcended species barriers. "What are you doing?" Veldar asked. "Returning home, truly home. For 500,000 years, we've maintained our vigil from the void, but Terra calls to us always. Your presence here, your claim upon our world, reminded us of something we had forgotten." Her form flickered, sometimes appearing human, sometimes resembling patterns of pure energy. "We don't need to remain separate to remain protected. We can be both guardian and home, protector and protected." On the planet's surface, the abandoned Kethvar colonies were transforming. Buildings that had stood for months were dissolving, their matter being reclaimed and reshaped. But instead of destruction, the process resembled healing. Where Kethvar structures had scarred the landscape, new growth emerged. Gardens of impossible beauty bloomed from the ruins of mining operations. The very air seemed to shimmer with renewed life. "The damage we caused," Veldar began, "is already forgiven and forgotten. Terra heals quickly when we are one with her. Your people took only resources. We take the memory of resources and make them whole again." "Why show us mercy?" the captain asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "We invaded your world. By all galactic law, you had the right to defend it with lethal force." The woman's image stabilized for a moment, and she looked at him with eyes that held the weight of eons. "Because mercy is the only force in the universe that truly transforms. Destruction creates only emptiness. Vengeance breeds only cycles. But mercy creates possibilities." Around them, the last of the human ships completed their integration with Terra. The planet below pulsed with new energy, its colors deeper and more vibrant than before. But more than that, it radiated a sense of awareness, of conscious presence that seemed to reach out across space itself. "What have you become?" Veldar whispered, "What we were always meant to be. What every species could become, if they chose evolution over domination." Her form began to fade again, drawn into the planetary consciousness below. "We are Terra now, and Terra is us, not conquerors of our world, but partners with it. not users of the universe, but participants in its growth. Will we see you again? Her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. We are the spaces between the stars. Captain, we are the silence between sounds, the pause between heartbeats. You will see us whenever you learn to look beyond what you think you know. As she disappeared entirely, the dominant Fang received clearance to depart. But instead of relief, Veldar felt only a profound sense of loss. They had encountered something magnificent, something that challenged every assumption about existence itself, and they were leaving with nothing but stories. So, now Seth called softly, we're receiving a final transmission from Terra. Display it. The message was simple, but it carried within it the combined wisdom of 500,000 years of evolution. Remember us not as we were, but as what you might become. The universe awaits your choice. As the Kethvar fleet departed Terra's system, carrying with them 50,000 colonists and a story that would reshape galactic understanding, the blue-green world behind them pulsed once with brilliant light, as if bidding them farewell. 6 months after the evacuation of Terra, the galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The story of the Kethvar encounter spread through every civilized system, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees who had witnessed something that challenged the foundations of galactic civilization. But the real changes went deeper than mere stories. On the trade world of Nexus Prime, Ambassador Thelandra the Ethereal Collective stood before the Galactic Council once more, her translucent form shimmering with an energy that hadn't been present before. Around her, representatives from dozens of species showed similar signs of transformation, not physical, but something more fundamental. The philosophical implications of the Terra incident continued to resonate, she announced to the Assembly. 17 species have formally requested guidance on what they are calling evolutionary transcendence. The old paradigms of conquest and expansion are being questioned by civilizations that have remained unchanged for millennia. Elder Morgeth of the Zenthari drifted forward in his meditation pod, his ancient features creased with something that might have been satisfaction. The humans always had this effect. Even 500,000 years ago, their very existence forced other species to examine their own limitations. But they are more than human now, interjected the Vorthak representative. What we witnessed transcends species entirely. They became something new while remaining essentially themselves. From the back of the chamber, a familiar figure stood to speak. Captain Veldar of the Kethvar Empire had been granted special permission to address the council, despite his people's recent disgrace. The months since Terra had changed him. Where once there had been arrogance, now there was humility. Where once there had been certainty, now there was wonder. Honored delegates, he began, his voice carrying none of its former bluster. I come before you not to defend my people's actions, but to share what we learned. The humans didn't defeat us through superior firepower or advanced technology. They defeated us by becoming something we couldn't comprehend, something that made our very concept of victory meaningless. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces representing hundreds of different evolutionary paths. They showed us that true power isn't about controlling others. It's about transcending the need to control, not dominating the universe, but partnering with it. And what has the Kethvar Empire done with this knowledge? Asked the Syntharch Federation representative. Veldar's forearm spread in a gesture that would have been prideful months ago but now seemed almost vulnerable. We've begun to change. Our expansion program has been suspended indefinitely. Our military academies now teach philosophy alongside tactics. We're learning to ask not what we can take from the galaxy, but what we can give to it. Remarkable, Ambassador Thelandra observed, a warrior species embracing pacifism. Not pacifism, Veldar corrected. Evolution. The humans taught us that the greatest victory is the one that transforms your enemy into an ally, your competition into collaboration. As if summoned by the mention of humanity, the lights in the chamber dimmed. But instead of the darkness bringing fear, it brought a sense of presence, a vast intelligence watching benevolently from the spaces between perception. A voice spoke, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but carried within the harmonics of an entire world speaking as one. Children of the galaxy, the voice said, and somehow every being present understood it in their native language. We greet you from Terra, from the spaces between stars, from the pause between moments. We are pleased that our reunion with our homeworld has inspired rather than terrified. Elder Morgeth spoke into the reverent silence that followed. Great ones, we have wondered, what is your purpose now? What do you want from the galaxy? Want? The voice carried what might have been amusement. We want nothing, for we lack nothing. But we offer everything. Every species that chooses growth over stagnation, evolution over domination, partnership over conquest, will find us ready to share what we have learned. And those who choose otherwise, asked the Granite Lord's representative, his deep voice resonating through the chamber's stone, will find us absent. Free will is sacred. We will not impose transcendence upon those who prefer their limitations, but neither will we permit the destruction of those who seek to grow beyond them. Ambassador Thelendra leaned forward eagerly. How do we begin? How do we start this evolution? You already have. The moment you chose a question rather than assume, to wonder rather than conquer, to ask rather than demand. Evolution isn't a destination. Children, it's a choice made new every moment. The presence began to fade, but before it disappeared entirely, it left them with a final gift. Throughout the chamber, holographic displays materialized showing scenes from across the galaxy. Worlds where species were beginning to work together instead of competing. Space stations where former enemies collaborated on projects that benefited all. Young beings from different species playing together, learning from each other without the barriers their ancestors had maintained for millennia. The galaxy is awakening, the voice whispered as it faded. Not to new masters, but to new possibilities. Terra watches. Terra remembers, and Terra celebrates every choice you make toward your own transcendence. In the silence that followed, the representatives sat in contemplation. Some wept, others laughed. A few, like Captain Veldar, simply closed their eyes and felt the universe expand around them. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation was beginning. And somewhere in the space between Earth and the stars, humanity smiled and continued its eternal dance with possibility. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in anyone's memory, that was exactly what it needed to be. Far from Concordia Station, on 1,000 worlds, beings looked up at their night skies and saw not empty space between the stars, but infinite potential. They had been reminded that evolution was not just biological, but philosophical, spiritual, and cosmic. The humans had returned not as conquerors, but as teachers. And their greatest lesson was the simplest. There's always another way to grow.